TIL that Michael Keaton only had 17 minutes of screen time even though the movie was called Beetlejuice. Supposedly one of his requirements to agree to do the sequel was to have the exact same screen time as the first movie. He knew that too much of that character would change the dynamic of the movie. Jaws was only on screen for 4 minutes in their movie. 17 minutes is actually pretty solid. The crazy thing about this movie is that he barely shows up until about an hour into a 90-minute runtime, and is really just an irrelevant comic relief side character until he takes over halfway through the climax. He's like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park hinted at and glimpsed throughout, but not the focus of the story until the end. Granted, Jurassic Park isn't called Velociraptors probably for that reason. Those of us older than AOL spent a lot of time with him in the cartoon though. Keaton had 32 minutes of screen time in Batman Returns, too. Boss asked me to wash work linen at home, so I did. That doesn't include all the extra costs associated to running a washer and dryer and wear and tear. And I thought you were going to solve the problem by washing them with a cheap red t-shirt and returning pink linens. TIL Looney Tunes Porky Pig's original voice actor, Joe Doherty, had a stutter he couldn't control. It caused production costs to become too high as his recording sessions took hours. Mel Blanc replaced him, allowing the stutter to be controlled and used comedically. "You're replacing me? Oh, I get it, I know the stuttering doesn't fit the character. Wait, the new voice actor is going to stutter on purpose." Face with raised eyebrow. Okay, Mel, the last guy had some sort of debilitating disability that was a real pain in the ass to deal with. We also kinda like the effect the disability gives the character, but we don't really wanna have to pay the guy for his time and deal with him. Instead, could you listen to a few reels and go ahead and copy him exactly? We fired him today. That weirdo. How was Joe Doherty a professional voice actor? TIL that during Hurricane Camille in 1969, the rainfall in Virginia was so heavy that birds drowned in trees and people had to cup hands around their face to breathe. According to the Weather Service, it was the probable maximum rainfall which meteorologists compute to be theoretically possible. TIL Mother Nature will straight up waterboard you if she's in the mood. So, how much did it rain? The landslides that resulted from that rain are the reason that one can see rocky hillsides in Nelson County, VA, where there was once soil and plant life. I am in Houston and was here during Hurricane Harvey. It wasn't bad until it sounded like there was a giant heavenly spigot in the sky. They suddenly got turned on full blast and lasted for days. Harris County, Houston, had 1 trillion gallons of water dumped on it in 4 days. I can't imagine any worse, but yet here we are with Hurricane Camille. Just checked my rainfall total for my area, 36. TIL Dashrath Manji, the mountain man, spent 22 years carving a 110-meter path through a mountain using just a hammer and chisel. Motivated by grief after his wife died due to a long route to the hospital, he shortened the journey from 55 kilometers to 15 kilometers. Some people just get stuff done even whilst everyone else mocks. I can understand why they did though. It's extraordinary to achieve what he did, and no wonder they would have thought it impossible. Reasonable people adapt themselves to the world. Unreasonable people attempt to adapt the world to themselves. All progress, therefore, depends on unreasonable people. George Bernard Shaw. Sometimes your heart will tell you what to do and you just gotta do it, no matter how insane everyone thinks you are. TIL in 2015, Devin Staples, who used to work at Disney World and would dress up as Gaston and Goofy, died instantly after attempting to launch a firework off his head while celebrating the 4th of July with his friends. Holy shit, I'm sure his friends have the worst trauma from seeing their friend explode in front of them. That's awful. It was like putting a live grenade on your head and pulling the pin. Shame. There's always a few stories a year like this. Like the kid who jumped off the boat on spring break into shark-infested waters on a dare. And he drifted into darkness never to be seen again. Senseless tragedies. You pray your kids make better decisions. The key sentence is he thought it was a dud. That means it had been lit, but had not gone off. So he put it on his head, where the main charge ignited and killed him. Please do not touch a firework that has been lit but not gone off until you've doused it in water, or if possible completely soaked it. It will take some time for water to penetrate, so better to stay away until you're sure. People who unsubscribed from their once favorite YouTuber, what made you hit unsubscribe? Intellectual dishonesty plus shifting away from the content I subbed for. All my favorite YouTubers stopped making videos. Mark Rober is now just engineering Mr. Beast and I can't stand his new stuff. Not my favorite, but I unsubscribed with great prejudice after a big scandal of charity fraud. I like this gardening channel. One day, he posted a chemtrail he saw at his house. Next thing I knew it was daily posts about some government conspiracy. I commented that he should make another channel for that stuff. He replied in crazy. I unsubbed. Till that Benjamin Franklin never patented any of his many inventions, writing that as we enjoy great advantages from the inventions of others, we should be glad of an opportunity to serve others by any invention of ours, and this we should do freely and generously. Makes me think of the seatbelt patent being free. If it was invented in the last 5 years, you'd probably have to pay an upfront installation fee for one and then pay a tiered subscription depending on how many seatbelts you need. He was probably drunk and with some escorts when he said this. What a world we could live in if more of us did this. TIL Helios 522 was a case of a ghost plane. The cabin didn't pressurize and all but one on board passed out from hypoxia. The plane circled in a holding pattern for hours driven by autopilot before flight attendant Andreas Prodromou took over the controls, crashing into a rural hillside. Crash investigators concluded that Prodromou's experience was insufficient for him to be able to gain control of the aircraft under the circumstances. /4/139 However, Prodromou succeeded in banking the plane away from Athens and towards a rural area as the engines flamed out, with his actions meaning that there were no ground casualties. Respect. Isn't this why the pilots have actual air masks with separate O2 tanks? The title, I believe, unintentionally makes it sound like Andreas was the cause of the plane crashing, but in reality he had just taken the controls and was trying to execute a turn when the plane finally ran out of fuel. Whether or not he could have landed the plane aside, the crash was in no way his fault, and if left in the holding pattern may have crashed in a much more populated area or been shot down to prevent it doing so. Till Kurt Lee, the first Chinese-American US Marine Corps officer, yelled out orders in Mandarin Chinese to confuse opposing Chinese troops during the Battle of Incheon in the Korean War. Wow! He was awarded a Navy Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor, and his brother was awarded the Army equivalent, the Distinguished Service Cross. More interesting is he spoke Mandarin. The vast majority of Chinese Americans at that time spoke Cantonese. Badass. As soon as I read about him shouting confusing shit, all I could think of is Worf saying guile in peak performance. Till that Jack Kelly, father of Grace Kelly and self-made millionaire, was banned from the Henley Regatta under the pretext that he was not a gentleman. He went on to beat the Henley champion at the Olympics and sent the King of England a note saying simply "Greetings from a bricklayer." And 85 years later, his grandson accedes to the throne as Albert II, Sovereign Prince of Monaco. Just a few years after the women's quadruple sculls at the Henley Regatta is renamed the Princess Grace Challenge Cup. Kelly Drive, a street in Philadelphia, is also home to a rowing competition every year and is home to Boathouse Row. Who's an actor who nailed a role so hard that nobody else will ever be able to live up to it? Only Mike Myers could make Austin Powers work. Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins, to the extent that my ex doesn't even know her real name. Anytime he sees Julie in a movie, he calls her Mary Poppins, writing that does not do justice to hearing this British character's name in a Salvadoran accent. Honorable mention, also as Maria Von Trapp, much nicer than the real MVT. Let's just say a Misery remake would be utterly pointless. Till Columbia Pictures refused to greenlight the 1993 film Groundhog Day without explaining why Phil becomes trapped in the same day. Producer Trevor Albert and director Harold Ramis appeased the studio, but deliberately placed the scenes too late in the shooting schedule to be filmed. Rubin had conceived of several causes for the loop, including a jilted lover placing a curse on Phil and a mad scientist's invention malfunctioning. Phil was a miserable sack who was stuck in a time loop until he learned not to be. Doesn't need to be more deep than that. I'm glad they left that out. Harold said Phil was in the loop for 10 years. The screenwriter said 10,000 years. That puts a whole new level of crazy when you read that. People who have stopped going to church, what made you stop? The focus on appearances. It seemed like no one actually gave a shit what went on behind closed doors as long as they weren't forced to acknowledge it. Felt like nobody would care if their back teeth were rotting out just as long as the front looked nice, so to speak. I stopped going when I was 14 and two different people, one of them the pastor, told me that dinosaurs never existed? I really went home that night, sat on my bed, and said to myself, I can't let myself ever get that stupid, and I never went back. I was going 4 times a week too. It was a big part of my life. They said my mom's cancers was God testing me and my family. Holier than thou pastor was screwing his secretary for years while married. They seemed to want money more than anything else. Like and subscribe.